Retired Lieutenant Colonel Charles Slimowicz, United States Army, Vietnam. Charles, or Chaz as his friends would call him, was a UH-1 Huey helicopter pilot in Vietnam. He was over there twice, 2 tours. First tour was 66 to 67, and then he went back in 68, 69. He was a commander of a Huey helicopter, folks, and he flew a lot of missions. The medevac missions, he said, were his toughest missions, but what a career he had. He retired in 1989 after 23 years in the Army as a lieutenant colonel, and just, God bless him. I miss these soldiers, these airmen, Marines, sailors. I miss them. You know, I've interviewed them. It's been 17 years ago. It was December 1st, 2006. I was in Abingdon, Maryland, interviewing a lot of veterans at that time back east, and I met Chaz. He was 63 at the time. He's 80 years old today, and he's still with us, folks. And I'm just so happy to share his story. One of his most memorable Christmases was when he went in country in December of 66. He flew backup support for Bob Hope, and of course, you know Bob Hope, he had a rapport with the troops, the enlisted troops, and Phyllis Diller, Joey Heatherton, and Anita Bryant were there too. So I've got a picture after this introduction of him, and just what a memory. So, but he just tells a great story through his eyes and ears. He tells about Vietnam, and one of my Huey helicopter pilots, like I said, and just what a blessing to have interviewed him. It was an honor to interview you, Chaz. I want to thank Michael and Darlene Surofsky, you guys. I love you guys. Thank you so much for your support of my work. You've stepped forward, you fill in the gap here, and I so appreciate both of you. And we're starting another round of interviews for you guys, and this is the first, and I hope you enjoy it. You know, folks, I don't have the luxury of entertaining you. This is a real life story. A lot of people don't like the responsibility and the accountability of a real story. But I know Michael and Darlene aren't like that, and they can appreciate the history that's here and just learning. Michael and I both had not served in the military, but you know, I think we're both doing a service now to our country. So you guys, thank you so much. I just say God bless you, and it's so great to know you and to work with you. And I would like to encourage those of you watching these videos, and a lot of you are getting a lot out of these stories, to just think about it. Just if you can help out to keep the stories coming, it'd be greatly appreciated. Don't just expect Michael and Darlene to do it all or anybody else. You know, I need your support and your help too. If you don't want to do anything here, help me go to Arizona in January and interview veterans down there. I'm going back out on the road. It's been a number of years since I've done that. I'm going to go in and focus on the Vietnam vets. So if you'd like to help support that, you can still donate through this, through the video description or the comment section of the video, or you can email me, or you can go to larrycappetto.com and just click on the link that says sponsor a vet. I would love to hear from you. I know there's a lot of you that want to help out, and that would really help me out to go out on the road. I don't have a budget for this, and I just rely on my faith in God, and He provides. So I just am grateful for that. Folks, my heart's full. I'm so happy to share Chaz's story with you today. Hope he's doing well. I've got to give him a call. But I appreciate you subscribing to this channel. Let's get the subscriber count up. Why not? Why not? Okay? Tell your friends, family, a fellow veteran, and if you want to be interviewed, just let me know. Maybe we can work something out, okay? Thank you for subscribing and sharing these stories, and I'll talk to you again on another broadcast. God bless you. That's another thing about some of these World War II guys. They don't look like they're 85. I had an 89-year-old guy in here this morning, and he's doing great. It's just amazing. But so you're one of my younger subjects here, so this is all right. Okay. Let's just give me a little bit of history. Okay, what year did you go to Vietnam?
I went to Vietnam in December of 1966.
And this was, were you enlisted or?
No, I was commissioned second lieutenant.
Okay.
Went through the Armor basic course in October through December of '65, and then went to flight school in March of '66. Graduated flight school, rotary wing, as a helicopter pilot in November 1966, and then went to Vietnam, my first assignment, 25th Infantry Division at Cu Chi.
Okay, so 25th Infantry Division, your rank again was?
I was at that time a first lieutenant.
Okay. And how old are you at this time?
I'm 63 years old.
No, at that time.
Oh, at that time?
Yeah.
I had just turned 23.
I'm not good at math, so I got to ask you. Okay. 23 years old. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about, Vietnam and the country at that time? You hear stuff about Vietnam. I mean, how are you feeling about it? Did you know you'd be eventually going to Vietnam, or?
I knew because I was in ROTC in my junior year at the University of Connecticut, and applied, was accepted to participate in the ROTC flight program, which provided 35 hours of flying experience, civilian time, but with the obligation to go to flight school, knowing at that time that Vietnam was just starting up, and that eventually that's where all the graduates went, was to Vietnam. So I kind of knew what I was getting into. And then as in '66, while you were in flight school, you could see the ramping up. Every flight class got larger and larger. And then, what was in the papers and discussed in the news, you realized that there was going to be quite a force over there that would require a lot of helicopter pilots.
Did you have this desire to be a helicopter pilot? I mean, what?
I had a curiosity with flying and enjoyed it as a youngster. You're always fascinated, like seeing planes fly over, or taking off and landing at airports. And I got interested in it and had that opportunity when I was in college. So I kind of knew what I was getting into, realized that it would entail some risk in terms of flight training and then being assigned to a combat unit, but I accepted it.
Well, tell me what you remember about going in country the first time you arrived, and the smells, the sights, the sounds. What do you remember about that?
It was a peculiar transition. I guess you wanted to make sure that you didn't miss a troop movement. So I actually flew to San Francisco the day before I was supposed to leave, and spent a day in San Francisco the day that we were going to leave, and it was supposed to be at 2000 hours or 8 p.m. at night. So I had met a doctor who was actually a neurosurgeon, and he was going, and so we kind of palled around and took in the sights, and then we went to Travis Air Force Base. And then unfortunately, the plane that we were supposed to be on was delayed, and rather than leave at 8 o'clock at night, it didn't leave till like 2 or 3 in the morning of the following day. So we had this trip that took over 24, 25 hours from the time that we had left Travis till when we got into Saigon. And I remember arriving at night, and it was hot, very humid, stifling heat, and very noisy. We landed at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base, which was on the north side of Saigon, and you could hear the planes taking off and landing. You could hear artillery being fired. Later to learn that it was called H&I, harassment and interdiction fires at pre-planned targets. And then arriving at our billets, and it was dusty, hot, somewhat dirty, tremendous amount of people, probably 50 or 60 in this billet. And then the next day, receiving the assignment, knowing where you were going, and just waiting to be told to get on a truck to go to Cu Chi. And so we motored from Saigon to Cu Chi. I'm going to say probably about 40 or 50 miles outside of Saigon. Maybe it's a little bit less. And then getting there and being processed, and finally getting to your unit that night and being assigned to a space in what we used to call a hooch, where there were other aviators. The officers and enlisted were separate. The senior non-commissioned officers had their area, the enlisted had theirs, and the officers had theirs. And there the officers were mixed, both commissioned officers and warrant officers. And I was assigned a hooch that had about 6 or 7 guys in it initially.
So you flew in a Huey helicopter.
That's correct.
Just tell me a little bit about the Huey as a helicopter and then what it was used for in Vietnam.
Well, our unit was a multi-purpose unit in the sense that the ramp-up of other aviation units hadn't been completed. So that I was assigned to A Company of the 25th Aviation Battalion, which was a general support company that had 3 platoons of UH-1 helicopters. They were all D models. They were all relatively new. They came in country when the 25th got deployed in March of '66. The unit was very top-heavy in rank. A lot of experienced Army aviators with a fair amount of time, but many of them were just like me, first-time people, so first-time tours. And they had been in country 9 months. The Huey that we flew were maintained in excellent condition because we had two senior maintenance officers. So the reliability, the crew chiefs were very excellent. They had been experienced people, had been in country in Vietnam. So your aircraft were very airworthy, so to speak. And we were used in a lot of different missions. Primary at that time when I got there were what we used to call combat assaults, where you would take the infantry troops into a landing zone, drop them off, and then once you got them all into the landing zone, got all the units deployed, then you were on standby for the rest of the day, usually to do resupply missions. And generally that lasted for a day or 2 days. And then other missions that we flew were regular resupply missions on a daily basis. Courier runs where they had a route that they would fly between the different base camps that 25th Infantry was deployed in. They were, the main base was Cu Chi. I would say on any given time there were probably 5,000 or 6,000 troops there. And as they would deploy infantry units out in the field, they would use 2 other bases, Tay Ninh and Dao Tiang, and there were units rotated in and out of there, and there was some permanent party also in those units. So we used to fly between them to pick up people who needed to be transported back and forth. And we did some medevac, not much. There were a few medevac missions or units, and if they were overwhelmed, then we would pick up a mission to do medevacs for wounded soldiers.
And as far as, again, tell me the crew on a typical Huey. I mean,
a typical crew consisted of a 4-man crew. The senior pilot was called the aircraft commander. Generally, he flew in the left seat, and then the other pilot was generally the person who was the inexperienced. He flew the right seat, and in a Huey, the instrumentation panel is set up that most of the primary instruments are in the right seat. So, and then we also had a crew chief who was generally an E4 and E5 enlisted person, and then a gunner who was in charge of the weapon systems, which were 2 7.62 machine guns that were mounted on the back that the crew chief and the gunner would maintain and would fly at that station in the rear of the helicopter. Usually the gunners came out of an infantry unit after 6 months. They would usually take guys who were experienced, knew what they were doing, and kind of as a reward would get them into an aviation unit had they been in a unit that had seen a lot of combat. So we had people who were very skilled in maintaining the weapons and cleaning, caring for them, and so forth.
Was there so many missions or hours that you flew? I mean, how do they rate that?
Well, there was a policy where you could not fly more than 130 hours in any 30-day period. So your operations officer and assistant operations officer and your NCOs in the ops section would monitor how many hours a pilot, and they would chart it. And then every night they would receive what missions had to be flown and how many hours were required. And the maintenance people would also coordinate with ops because they would track the amount of hours that a helicopter was being flown, because services were pulled every 25 hours, and at every 100 hours it was a major service. And then there were some things that were changed. on more hours than either 25 or 100, or by time or by where. So they would know how many aircraft would be up on a certain day, the next day, how many hours they would be allowed to fly it, and then they would match the missions with the hours to be flown with the availability of aircraft, and then also the crew chiefs and the pilots too would get it. And generally, I would say on an average we flew anywhere from maybe 5 to 7 days before you would get a day off, a complete day off. In a lot of cases you would fly a half a day. You might have a morning mission, and from early get up you might be up as early as 5, and you would probably be over at 1 in the afternoon. Some people would come on in the late morning and fly through the early evening. And then each night there were a number of night missions that would have to be flown. I also flew armed helicopters. I flew general support in Company A for 6 months, and then went over to B Company, which was part of the 25th Aviation Battalion, and they were basically a gun company that had 3 sections of pilots that supported armed helicopter missions. And we also had a general support mission. So we would rotate 2 days. One day you'd be primary on team up on guns. Second day you would be the alternate in case the first team went out, the second team would come up, and the third team would fly the general support missions, which were mainly support of ground convoys and engineer operations. They would support the 25th Engineer Battalion.
Well, take me on a mission. I mean, as far as taking troops in, was that called an assault mission? Or?
Combat assault.
Okay, can you just take me on a mission and tell me about, loading or, the radio call and going in and what you're actually doing?
Generally what would happen is once they knew what crews were going to fly what missions, and if it was a combat assault, generally it was anywhere from 10 to 15 ships in an assault. And they would pair up the crews, and the pilots would go up and receive a briefing the night before the mission would be flown, and the ops officer and the flight lead would give the briefing, and they would discuss where we were going, who we were transporting, where the LZs were so we could mark our maps, what the intelligence briefing was in terms of what to expect into the LZ, what time we had to be up, what time we had to be ready to go with making sure our aircraft was pre-flighted, what time we would crank. It would be on a certain time based on the pickup time. Generally, we either hauled troops out of Cu-Chi and inserted them into the battlefield, or went to one of these 2 other places and would pick troops up and then insert them. And most of our missions were flown though either out of Cu-Chi. So generally, we would probably have a pickup time 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and so we would probably get up as early as 4:30. You get yourself physically ready, eat, be at the aircraft pre-flight. Usually the pilot did the pre-flight. The aircraft commander would have a final mission briefing with the flight lead. Then you'd meet at the revetment area where the aircraft were housed. At a certain time, everybody would crank, and then where they were in the order of flight, they would hover out, we would line up, and then the infantry troops would already be there. Usually it was right on the runway. They would walk in, and generally we carried anywhere from 4 to 6 people, combat troops. Although the aircraft could carry more because of the heat and density altitude, it would restrict your total load, because if you got overloaded, you could either be out of center of gravity, or the aircraft performance would be affected. In other words, the RPM would bleed off the engine because it was overweight, and so generally they limited to 4 to 6 combat equipped troops. Sometimes you would have less if you were carrying someone with mortars, because of the mortars, base plate and the tube and whatever the ammunition that they would be carried. And we would always, on a combat assault, you would always have an armed helicopters, anywhere from 2 to 4 armed helicopters. And generally after you cranked, it was generally a 20 to 30 minute flight to where they were going to be inserted. Because of the speed of the aircraft, we could cover a pretty good distance, and where their area of operations were fairly close by. And generally, you would have this information the night before. There might be a series of preps. One would be aircraft, tactical air support, generally by the Air Force. At that time, a lot of those missions were F-100s, F-4s. And then after they were done with their dropping, then you would have artillery preparation. And just before you would hit the, on short final, so to speak, and when you were on the approach to the LZ, they would lift the fires, artillery fires, and the gunships would then roll in, escort you, and usually they went hot, and they would be firing their rockets and their machine guns. And we would get in and drop the troops. As soon as they got dropped, we'd come out, return to the base camp, and generally you had either 2 or 3 lifts, depending on how many troops you're putting in, and insert it. So generally it was over within maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the fuel load that you could carry. And then certain ships were cut loose, others were maintained as standby, as backup for resupply missions. Then usually what you did was refuel, go to a certain place, shut down, and just wait for whenever they needed a mission flown. The same kind of effect went in on the armed helicopters. When we escorted it on in, we too would have a briefing. There would be coordination between both companies on what exactly the roles were and what was going to take place, the timing, and generally after an incident.
Hold on just 1 second. Somebody turn the air conditioner on. I gotta knock it off. Hold on. So if you're going into an LZ, I mean, do you know if it's hot at the time you take off, or did you go in any hot LZs?
Oh, sure.
What comes to your mind when I ask you that? Is there a particular one or two that?
Well, the first mission that I flew in a combat assault, the intel said that we could expect to receive ground fire from it. And when we first went in, I'm going to say I was probably in the 4th or 5th aircraft of the flight of 10 that was going into this LZ. And sometimes you can't tell if it's friendly or enemy fire because all hell breaks loose, because the gunships are firing. A lot of times rounds will ricochet from their 7.62, and they're coming parallel to you, so you see the tracers. Every 5th round wasn't a incendiary round, so you would see a tracer go by. And then because of the way the aircraft were flown, they were flown in a staggered formation, and that was to get cover fires between aircraft. You would have, if you were on the left side, the aircraft on your right front at, say, your like 1 or 2 o'clock position was firing across your front to cover that side, plus your own gunner was firing across the next one that was offset off of you. And so a lot of times you would see it going back and forth. And then you would see their fires too. Sometimes you could, catch out of the corner of your eye, possibly flashes from the tree lines at wherever they could be. But I think the real indicator would be people calling it out, a position that they visually could acquire, seeing people or seeing a muzzle flash. So then you really, your sense is kind of heightened. And then when you did get hit, you could hear the round penetrate the aircraft going through the sheet metal. So you knew you got hit. And my first experience, all hell broke out, and not knowing what to expect, I don't think I was as aware as, say, more of the veterans were. And we thought we got hit, and after we had finished the lift, we went back to the LZ, shut down, and after shutting down, then we realized that we did get hit. We had taken a couple rounds, and they had gone through part of the rotor system and part of the upper part of the structure of the aircraft, but didn't penetrate the engine or any of the key lines like fuel lines, hydraulic lines, oil lines. So everything functioned normally in terms of your instrumentation and performance of your engine, but until you shut down, then we realized. And when you had a new guy and he received a hit, they would always, kind of laughingly say, "You lost your cherry that day." So that was my experience. Losing a cherry was on the first mission, combat assault mission that I had flown.
Well, tell me about you're in formation, you're flying to an LZ, and then tell me about coming in, how you fly, and then inserting the troops so you touch down, and just give me some.
Well, as you approach the ground, usually en route, you were probably doing 80 to 90 knots. You were flying a formation, so people would offset their aircraft and maintain that distance. Flight lead and the trail were the key positions in a combat assault. Flight lead had to navigate. Trail was kind of like the backup in terms of making sure that we were on the course. Trail would tell people to, if they were out of position in the formation, to either close it up, move it in, you're drifting out, whatever it may be. And then as you approached the LZ, it was in this area that we were in, it was flat. We were probably 25 to 40 feet above sea level without any major mountains, with the exception of one mountain that was in our AO, but generally mountainous terrain did not interfere with your flight. You were in areas where there was a lot, to the north of Cu Chi, there were a lot of, it was jungle. To the south of Cu Chi, you started to get into, you were in the upper part of the delta, relatively flat, a lot of rice paddies, trees on certain parts of the rice paddies on the dike lines maybe, but it was more open vegetation. Generally, you didn't get a lot of fire in those areas because they would be too open. It was when you ran operations where there were a lot of tree lines and a lot of jungle that you would end up drawing fire. As you approach the LZ, naturally the aircraft would start to slow up, and when you were about 500 feet off the ground, you were kind of like we used to call the dead man's zone. One was you're being exposed to fire. You're more susceptible probably to get hit at that in that area. They would wait as you would start to slow up. They would get a better shot. The other would be if you had an engine or transmission or hydraulic failure that was critical in terms of at that height, engine failure, you might not be able to recover, just the performance of the aircraft. And you would just start to slow up, and as you touch down, a lot of times the troops would be dismounting the aircraft before you'd get it on the ground. And in some cases, they would wait till they got on the ground and offload, and they would deploy. They would put out their troops to each side, and then as soon as your troops were off, you'd have to give a call up, ready to go, and flight lead would just pick up. So you'd watch the aircraft in front of you, and they would say, go, and you'd watch, and you'd take off in formation and just get out of there. And as soon as you broke ground, they would usually keep it low level for a while on the deck, so to speaking, flying formation. And then once you cleared the AO, then if they had a distance to go, they would climb to altitude, generally 1,000 feet, and go back to wherever the staging area was, land, reload troops again, take a quick look as they were loading to see if you had anything that might cause a problem in terms of a hit or whatever. And you check your engine instrumentation, and everything was up and running. Off you go again. If an aircraft dropped out, they would generally then just reassign the people to another aircraft, and you just keep going.
Did you have friends that were wounded or killed, or ships knocked out of the air when you were there?
I had one guy in our hooch that had been only there about 30 days in country, and he caught a round in his lower part of his ankle and was medevaced. He wasn't able to keep in country. Just before I had gotten to Cu Chi, we did have a sustained a fatality in terms of an aircraft. The guy took a round and was killed. Kind of ironic, when I went over to the before I went over to the gun company, one of our sister ships from B Company got shot down, and I was flying a mission where I had taken the command element of the signal battalion out to check their different sites where their troops were deployed. And when we were coming back in, we had heard their Mayday call that they had been shot down, and we were kind of monitoring the net. That's the frequency that, in an aircraft, you had three primary aircraft radios. You had a FM, frequency modulated, VHF, very high frequency, and a UHF, ultra high frequency. And usually the FM was for a tactical unit on the ground. Usually your UHF and VHF was used for your own company frequencies and for flight operations, to flight center to monitor where you were and tracking your movements and things like that, or for air-to-air with other units or with the Air Force if there had to be an interaction. So we were just monitoring the radio frequency and knew that they went down, and a medevac went in to get these guys. They didn't have any communication with the guys that were on the ground. They saw that the aircraft had crashed, had turned over. They could only see 3 people. They said that they had received fire on the ground, and when the medevac couldn't get in, it was late in the afternoon. It was kind of getting towards dusk. At that time, I had probably 400 or 500 pounds of fuel, which equated to less than an hour flying time. Generally, an aircraft could be flown 2.5 hours. Generally, you had about 1,500, 1,700 pounds of usable fuel. Depending on your rate of burn, aircraft would burn certain amounts more than others. And all these guys that I had on board were all combat equipped. They were in other words, they had a steel pot, they had their weapons, they had flak vests, they had extra ammunition. And so the guy that was in charge of the rescue operation, I came up on his frequency and said that I had, I think I had 5 or 7 guys that were combat equipped, and I said I think we could get in and get out and get those guys, and they would provide a ground force if they had received fire. So the option was, and I had at that time I was just I was still a lieutenant, and the senior guy on board the aircraft was a lieutenant colonel, was the battalion commander. So I explained the situation to him, and I said, we can do 3 things. I can turn the mission down, take you guys back, or I can drop you back and I can get out there and try to get these guys, or I can take you in with me, and you're combat equipped and you could probably provide some kind of support on the ground for these guys. We don't know how bad, if they're wounded or killed or whatever. And he said no. He said, let's go. So we went in, and I kind of did something a little bit, I don't want to say, it was basic tactics taught in flight school, but rather than make a normal approach, they were in an area where there were a lot of rice paddies. So what we did was we counted the number of rice paddies, the dike lines, from where they were to where I thought I could let down over the trees and go in low level rather than be above the tree line. And all we did was, at that time I was flying the aircraft, and I had a relatively new pilot on board with me who was on the battalion staff, Captain Templeton, Willie Templeton, who later became a full colonel. And we went in, and I said to him, you count the rice, you count the dike lines, I will too, and you stay on the controls in case I get hit. You gotta fly the ship. And so we went in, and when we got to the last one, we rather than go in over the tree and down, we kind of swerved around and kind of was like rotating back like a figure 8, swerving, going down, and went around the tree line. And sure enough, there were the guys right where we thought they would be. And the guys jumped out, the signal battalion, and it was his battalion commander, and I think it was operations officer, his sergeant major, and I think 2 enlisted guys. And so they went out and they went over to the aircraft, and everybody was alive, but one guy had a broken leg. So they basically took the sliding door off the aircraft and put him on it and used it as a litter, carried him to the aircraft, and our guys 2 machine guns were firing, and the gunships that were above us kept on firing on the parallel lines where they thought the enemy was, and provided close support for us. And when I came out, I decided to go out the same way I came in, kind of just element of surprise. And there wasn't any wind, so there wasn't any downwind takeoff that would adversely affect the aircraft. And at that time, we had burned off enough fuel that we had plenty of power to go downwind, so to speak, and came downwind and took off downwind and broke over the trees and got him back to Kuchi and landed the aircraft. And then after that did we realize we had taken a number of hits going in or coming out or both ways. But none of them had penetrated any of the controls or the engine systems. So the aircraft was flyable in a sense.
Were you ever scared, or did you feel invincible at times? I mean,
I think everybody when you're young feels invincible. I think after like that thing, then you realize, damn, that was a close call, you know, in that. And I've had some other ones too, where after it was over, you're not thinking about it while it's going on, but after it's over, it'll definitely, kind of give you the idea that you were there, and you just walk through kind of like the shadow of death, so to speak. But getting back, it was ironic. When I got in country in Tan Son Nhut, the next day when I went up to 25th Aviation Battalion, there was a captain who had gotten signed. His name was Charles Hauser, and he was from North Carolina, married, had 2 young boys. So he and I were going to have the same DROS rotation from overseas, date estimated rotation overseas. And he got assigned to the headquarters of the battalion, and I got assigned to A Company. And so he and I lived separately, and he and I would see each other, and he would come down and at times fly missions with A Company when I was over in A Company. And about the time that I got reassigned to B Company, he got reassigned and came down as our XO. And it was ironic because he had gotten checked out in the gunships, not only flying-wise, but using the different systems that we had in terms of the minigun system, rocket 7.62 rockets, grenade launcher. And so after he got checked out, he flew a mission. The first mission he flew on, he was killed in action. So that day that I rotated and left was kind of like a, why me type, here I am, a bachelor, single guy, and I make it through, I had so many more hours than this guy, and he flies one mission and, he gets killed like that. So it kind of sticks with you. My second tour back, we lost a number of guys in the bird dog unit, and I think mostly that was from inattention to flying the plane in an envelope where you're susceptible to a crash, probably not being focused. And we lost one guy flying a reconnaissance mission, and never found him for 6 months, and then did find him. And on the first day of the search, we lost another guy. Actually, his aircraft went down like in September, and then the first day of that rescue, we lost the second guy, and then we didn't find the first guy until 6 months later, and never found the second guy. And it was ironic, the second guy was the son of a 2-star admiral, Admiral Frank Wiesner. I want to say his father's name was Frank, who was on an aircraft carrier, I believe, in the South Pacific at the time, right off of Vietnam. And his dad, this took place in September. No, actually, it took place in October. And I think his dad came somewhere like in March or April of the following year to see where his son went down and kind of go back and kind of just, I guess, give closure for himself. But so those kind of things, touch you because the guy is sleeping next to you and now he's gone. And then when you have to go out and recover a body like that, that really hits home. And it was tough because they lost some special forces guy was in the back seat of this other pilot on this second tour.
Did you mentioned briefly about medevacs. You were used at times to take the wounded or the dead out?
Yes, yeah. Well, usually medevacs, they did not evacuate the dead because of blade time. Their primary mission was to save lives. One of the missions that I had when I was in A Company as a helicopter pilot was at night. Usually there were 2 ships that were put on a standby mission, and one was to support division artillery called Davarti, and you went to one area of the base camp and you received a briefing on what they expected that night, if there was going to be any kind of ground contact at the main base camp, either Kuchi or maybe out at one of these other locations. You might go out there to fly a night mission where you'd go out and you'd be there overnight. And then we had another aircraft that was just like a support aircraft at night in case something came up that the division needed could be anything from resupply or somebody getting hurt or someone getting wounded. You'd go out and fly a mission. And usually, it was relatively, you never got called, I don't want to say never got called, but relatively it was quiet. And this type of mission, you would only pull it maybe once a month, these types of missions, because the number of guys in the unit, you'd rotate the mission at night. But I remember one night, was actually the next day after we had been up, had been the primary crew, that a ground force from the division had been ambushed at night. And our crew had to go out and pick up the three guys that were killed. And we didn't have any body bags, and we thought there was probably body bags already out there. So when we got out there were no body bags. And that was pretty tough, to see guys who were, shot up pretty bad and the blood all over them. And you get pretty quiet, at night, or pretty quiet. The chatter in the cockpit ceases, and you get pretty focused on what just taken place. So what they basically did would take their ponchos that they would have, which is rain protective gear, and they wrapped the bodies as best they could. And because of the size of the aircraft, we could only fit two flat on the floor, and we didn't want to put a third one on top of another one. So we flew two bodies and then came back and got the third body. And it hits home because on that night mission that you would have, a lot of times the mortuary, if there were guys who were killed in action like that, their bodies were prepped and taken to the mortuary down in Tonsonute or Long Bend. So a lot of times they then were in body bags, but you'd usually get that call in the middle of the night, maybe 10:30, 11, 12, whenever they would finish getting the bodies ready, or early in the morning, depending on, because the primary focus was to return the remains of a loved one back. And that was pretty sobering too. You'd see a truck pull up and they would take the bodies out of the vehicle and load them on the aircraft, and you'd have like a tag was on the bag with the person's name and everything, and you would say, somebody somewhere in the States is getting a call right now. Here's a loved one that's died like that. That's going back to be buried. Pretty tough. Pretty tough.
Have you been to the wall at Vietnam?
Oh yeah, definitely been there several times.
Was it hard the first time?
Well, the first time I went with my family, I think one of the hardest times was the second unit that I served with in Vietnam was a fixed-wing reconnaissance airplane company. And for some reason, I would say 6 to 10 of us got real close while we were there and bonded. And a guy who I flew with, who lives in Annapolis, started a reunion type of thing in the mid-90s, George Savani. And so he hosted a reunion one year, and as part of it I helped him plan some of the events. And one of the things that we decided to do that year was to go down to the wall. So the former CO of the company, who was kind of like the central figure, he was at the reunion, and I kind of planned a little ceremony where we got a wreath, I got a wreath, and all of us went down there, and we had an opening prayer, and then they presented the wreath and closing prayer, and that was pretty tough because there were guys from that unit that we honored specifically who were, our call sign was headhunters, and so we knew that on the wall there were a number of headhunters who had died, who were there, that we presented a wreath. And I think then you kind of look back and you look at the wall and look at the number, over 58,000 names on it. That wow, there are two guys from my hometown that died in Vietnam that I went to high school with. One guy was 2 classes ahead of me, and one guy was 2 classes behind me. And we played sports together and Boy Scouts together, various times. And here are young guys that were killed in the early part of their life like that. So that was kind of tough to get down and see their names on the wall. Those names, really grab you because they're part of your history of growing up as a young man, and so that was tough also.
Tell me what the American flag means to you and represents to you.
Every time, as a kid growing up, I always, can remember the picture of the Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. So, and I think back when I was a kid growing up in the 50s, especially sporting events, playing ball or something, that flag was always flying there. And in the little town that I grew up in, always had a Memorial Day parade, and the flags being seen, and how people honored it. You didn't have the kind of dissension or free right of speech that you had starting in the 60s and 70s, where you started to see the flag desecrated. So it always would mean a great deal to me. And I can remember, especially playing sports in college, when they'd play the national anthem. Even today, it kind of puts a shiver up your spine because it reflects the history of our country and all the battles. And being a retired military person, it reflects all those who gave their lives, not only in action, but those who probably died after they returned, veterans who probably had debilitating injuries or illnesses, physical or mental, that have perished because of a war like that. To me, it's a symbol of strength and a symbol for democracy.
What should we remember about Vietnam, Chaz?
I think the thing to remember is that those who went with a lot of honor, purpose, dedication, selfless sacrifice. Maybe we went with a little lack of understanding or confusion, but yet we went because we were called to do something for our country. And I think that spirit of service will always be there with those who are Vietnam-era veterans, even though maybe we might not have received the homecoming like other folks have received, but it still represents to us our call to serve our country and be Americans.
Are you proud that you're a Vietnam veteran?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do people thank you for your service?
I think now, since the 90s and the Gulf War, I think a lot of people have come full circle and they're more patriotic, and they realized some of the things that the Vietnam veterans weren't recognized. They come forward because it was, I think you look back over time and seeing some of the documentaries on Vietnam, people are saying, wow, I can't believe that actually happened. These guys didn't deserve that, and I think a lot of us have come back and served on active duty or gotten out and became responsible citizens and have served as leaders in government, nonprofit organizations, and business. Those who came back, a lot of them were highly educated. Those who didn't use their GI Bill and either picked up skills as craftsmen or as college graduate and have contributed to this country. So I think people realize that we were a generation that might have been forgotten, but not ones who didn't give up, who kept up service to country. That's what I think.
That's good. Are there sights, sounds, or smells today that bring back memories of Vietnam?
The smell of diesel fuel brings back, memories of Vietnam. Heat, thunderstorms like you would see in the summertime, you would see in Vietnam. For a while, the sound of a siren would get your attention, because usually that was in Vietnam a signal of danger, in the sense of if you were in a base camp, and at night especially, that meant that there was usually incoming rounds coming in to take cover. When I flew guns, we would be on a standby to be off the ground in 5 minutes, and you wouldn't leave the company area, and the primary signal a mission was being done, they would sound a siren in the company area, and depending on what your position was, if you were the aircraft commander, you went to the operations, got a quick briefing, got the coordinates, got what type of mission you were going to fly. The other pilot went to the aircraft with the crew, and they had it up and running. So by the time you got there, you put your, we used to call chicken plate, put your vests on, put your helmet on, and we're off the ground, usually within 5 minutes to get to. So that kind of sound of a siren there for a while kind of brings back memories of those kind of incidences, either an attack of some type or responding to a call to support a company.
Was there an adrenaline rush when you'd get before a flight? I mean, or did that wear off after a while?
Whenever you flew a combat assault mission, you always had adrenaline. That, sense in the morning, you're pretty calm, in terms of going through the pre-flight and all those kind of things. You wonder what was going to take place, but, it was still pretty calm. But when you started to get short final, that's when you could really feel the rush of excitement, especially when you start hearing guns firing as you got closer into the LZ or in the LZ. Definitely when we were flying that mission, like, for gunship support, when I was flying guns, when that siren went off, your heart was racing. It was just like pounding that you'd get going, and you were just rushing through. And it's amazing, though, being trained, what things you had to do in what sequence, that you wouldn't forget many things, and you would be ready to go. I think the adrenaline, my first mortar attack was kind of unique because I had been in country almost 90 days and the base camp hadn't been mortared. And we always used to laugh about that, sitting around at hooch at night when they would fire artillery. A lot of times they'd fire right over the top of the base camp. So if you heard the bang and then the whistle, then you knew that was outgoing. But if you heard the whistle and the bang, you knew it was incoming. And we, you'd joke, and they would say, when you hear that, you'll know that you're getting hit. Well, the first one was, I was flying a night mission with another guy who was the senior pilot, and we went over to DeVarty, landed the aircraft, and got the briefing, what to expect, met our forward observer. They would put an artillery officer, generally a lieutenant or a captain, and the mission at night was if the base camp, Cu-Chi, got mortared, the artillery units that were already in camp had pre-positioned fires, and they would fire on known or suspected locations. And the purpose was to get the aircraft up and get the forward observer, and either him visually sighting or by the radar that could track around coming in, the DeVarty could trace back, get an azimuth on it, and the range, possible range, then he would call the artillery fires, and they would respond to his commands. So we went over, and the night that I flew this one mission was the anniversary of the 25th Infantry Division being in Cu-Chi or being in Vietnam for 1 year. So they said, we can expect a mortar attack. Well, you've heard this all the time, so you kind of take it, and okay, it's just like flying a combat assault, you're going to have ground fire. So we went over after the briefing, and we're sitting in the officers' club watching AFN TV, and all of a sudden, man, we got hit. And you talk about knowing that it's incoming. When you saw people just running out of the officers' club to get into a bunker, and so I went immediately to the aircraft, and I tell you what, hearing the rounds come in and physically seeing them explode, and it was in dark, it was dusk, which is the hardest to acquire visually. And they picked the right time of night, knowing that even if we got in the air, it was going to be difficult for us to visually see the rounds because your eyesight can't adapt to the difference in the ambient light out there. So that was kind of, talk about having your heart. And I got behind the revetment, untied the aircraft. I was the first of the aircraft. And the gunner and the crew chief come running around, and I said, let's go. And they didn't realize that I was there, and they were just screamed, and fell on the ground and got up and got the aircraft cranked, and that was kind of a tough decision because the guy that I was with didn't show up at the aircraft, the other pilot. So after running a while, I called my ops and made the decision and left and flew the mission by myself, full solo, which was kind of unheard of at the time. So I don't know whether I was more afraid or the other guy was more afraid.
I'm going to have you do one more thing.
Sure.
I asked all the veterans at the end of my interview, when I tell you from where you're seated, can you give me a salute into the camera?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, right in the camera. Great. Hey everybody, Larry Capetto here. I wanted to share a few things with you. A lot of you have been watching my veteran stories on my YouTube channel and listening to them on my radio station. Well, I've got something I want to show you here. I've got DVDs of all the work I've done over the years. 12 films in the series, Lest They Be Forgotten. This is the most popular film that I've done on YouTube. It's Vietnam Remembered. And a lot of you have seen this. This features a lot of the Vietnam stories that you guys have grown to love over the last couple of years, and I'm just so proud of all the veterans and all of my films. And I've got a documentary series here, and over the last 21 years I've produced 12 films in the series, and I want to make them available to you. I don't think a lot of you know that these are available, these DVDs, and I'm thinking Christmas, okay? Really, I'm kind of late on this, but I can still ship them out in time. I'm going to offer these to you on my website. You can order them from my website. I'm going to have all 12 films on there. All 12 films. First two are on Omaha Beach. Volumes 3 and 4 are The Battle of Iwo Jima. Volume 5 is called Return to Normandy. Volume 6 is Vietnam Remembered. Volume 7 is Lest They Be Forgotten Canada, where I produced a World War II film for Canada in 2007. And the Korean War is Volume 8. Volume 9 is Lest They Be Forgotten Las Vegas, where I interviewed about 45 World War II veterans in the Vegas area. Great film. Volume 10, The Holocaust Remembered, folks. It's something we all need to watch. Volume 11, Lest They Be Forgotten Texas, where I interviewed a lot of veterans in Washington County, Texas, 2009, 2010, and it was premiered there. 2,000 people showed up, standing room only. It was so successful. In that film, we go over World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So there's veterans from all three wars there. And Volume 12, The Battle of the Bulge. So that makes up the documentary series, Lest They Be Forgotten, folks. They're available on my website, DVDs. Folks, this is the perfect gift. If you don't know what to get your loved one, or for a family member, a veteran, just anybody in your life, your school teachers, your history teachers in school, your next door neighbor, these are great stocking stuffers. I'm telling you what, you can't go wrong. These are just professionally produced. I put my heart and soul into these, and featured in here, these videos are a lot of the veterans that you're watching right now, but you're going to get all 12 films. And for those of you who buy the whole series, you buy all 12 films, I'm gonna give you a red, white, and blue Lest They Be Forgotten bracelet. Okay, I've got them in all three colors, red, white, and blue. I'm going to put a graphic on the screen. You can see it there. And I'm also going to give you, this is really special to my heart. This is a commemorative pin. It says Lest They Be Forgotten with the dog tags. This was made especially for my work. A lot of you know me as Voices of History. The documentary series has always been called Lest They Be Forgotten. If we don't remember, we're going to forget. It's an afterthought, and it's been my trademark all these years, 21 years now, Lest They Be Forgotten. You see one on my jacket when I'm doing the introductions to my videos. I'm going to show that on the screen right now too. So you can see the commemorative pin and you can see the wristbands. I'm going to offer those to anybody who buys the complete series of 12 videos. Now, if you buy one or more videos, I'm going to send you for free Songs from the Heart. This is piano music that I've recorded over the years. I'm an old rock and roller, but this is the softer side of Larry. So these are some piano songs that I've created. I'm actually working on a volume 2, which is going to be called Sounds from Heaven. I'm composing orchestral sounds now, a lot of cello, violins, and beautiful instruments. Such relaxing music. I should put a caution on here. Don't listen to this while you're driving. Kidding. You can do that. But it is relaxing. I think you'll really like it. And that's going to go with every order that comes in. I'm going to send this CD along with it. So it doesn't matter what you order. Any one of the videos, like I said, there's 12 in the series. I encourage you to go to my website. It's larrycapetto.com. I'm going to put a link in the video description of this video. It's right below the video that I'm talking now. Look below. You'll see video description. You'll see larrycapetto.com. You're going to go on that website. I'll also have a direct link to the order page. It's called the Honor Store. You can order these videos, one or the whole series. There'll be a link on there for that. So I'm really excited about this. You can actually also, if you don't want a DVD, you can order a digital download of these films. So you'll have these films for yourself on your computer to watch anytime you want. The entire films. If you haven't seen these documentaries and you're just watching the interviews, you're missing a big part of my work. I started my work 21 years ago, and I was standing outside of my home, downstairs, putting up my flag, thinking, what's going to be different about my documentaries? You know, the world doesn't necessarily need another documentary, so what's going to be different about it? Two things came to mind. Number one, the story's going to come from the source, which it has over the years. It's come from the veterans. It's not a narrated Hollywood version. It's not somebody's third opinion of it. This came right from the veterans, and a lot of my veterans are gone, you know. So that was the number one thought. Second thought I had was the day's going to come where I'm going to share these films and this history with our younger generation. And folks, I've been true to both of those. I've spoken to over 100,000 students across our country in 100 schools over 21 years about freedom. I challenge our young people with the fact that you're born in a free country, but do you ever give thought to the fact of why you're free and the price for freedom? I show them a little bit of my film. It opens up a door. And for the next hour, I shock them into reality. That war is not a video game. You know, that blood has been shed, lives have been lost to protect the freedoms that we have in our country. And we're in a day right now where this series is paramount. You know, history is best learned from those who were there, the teachers tell me. This is a first-hand account of what happened. And folks, from a history perspective, we need to learn from our history or we're condemned to repeat it. That's what they tell me. And that's just obvious. You look around the world today, people are trying to erase the history that I've recorded. They're trying to erase it, but with Voices of History, it's not going to happen. Not here, not on my watch. So folks, it's very important. Our young people need to get these. You need to download the apps of my radio station, Voices of History Radio. It's been tuned in, or over 50 countries in the world have tuned into Voices of History Radio. It's a great supplement. People are watching it all over the world. And that you need to have your kids download that so they have living history in the palm of their hands, folks. In the palm of their hands. They got all this other stuff. Why not have living history and learn about what their grandfathers did, what their fathers have done? Learn about those in your family that have served in the military and the price that was paid for our freedoms and why a lot of the Vietnam vets have been troubled over the years. So it's just an ongoing, this should be a curriculum, man. This should be in schools. I'm serious. The VA bought 500 copies, I think, or they bought a lot of copies of my Vietnam Remembered back when I did it in 2007 because they felt it had therapeutic value. So it went to all the VA vet centers across the country, helping heal the emotional scars of war. I feel all my stories have that therapeutic value, and a lot of you have commented on that. There's healing in telling a traumatic event for the veteran. A lot of the Vietnam vets have told me that like a burden was lifted off their shoulders, a weight was lifted off their shoulders after they talk to me. And I hear that over and over again. And 75% of the stories I've heard, folks, are for the first time. And I always have to look up and say, Lord, why me? All I know they talk to me is because I provide a non-threatening environment where they can open up and share because they know they know I'm interested and they can trust me. They can trust me. I practiced the fine art of listening well over the years, and it continues on. Amen. And you know this is a ministry for me, folks. If that offends you, I'm sorry. You probably watched on the wrong channel, but it is. I thank my God I can serve Him and my country through the lens of my cameras. Amen. That's the way it is. I've always felt guilty for not serving. I was a little young from Vietnam. Came close during the Gulf War, but never did enter the military with the whole thing. But I tell you, I'm a warrior at heart. I'm a Marine at heart, soldier, airman, sailor, Coast Guard, Merchant Marines. I've interviewed them all, folks. Black, white, tall and short, fat and skinny, rich and poor, from all over the country and in Canada. So I just encourage you to go to my website, pick up a stocking stuffer, pick up a great Christmas gift, buy it for yourself. You know, these stories are amazing. And I should have said this when I started this. When you buy these videos, these funds go back into my work. So this is a way to help me to continue my work, is through the sale of these DVDs. I've got 5,000 of them in my garage. If you want to buy them all, let me know. I'll give you a special deal. I'm serious. You can donate them to your schools, libraries across the country. If you have time on your hands, you want a project, buy my whole inventory, and you can do that. I've been wanting someone to do that. I'll give it to you for just an amazing price. Contact me. I'll sell you the whole inventory. And you can donate these to libraries, museums. You can give them away to underprivileged kids, schools, or what have you. And just have a great resource here to get the word out, folks. So, okay, did I cover everything? You guys, did I get it all? Okay. My production staff is making sure. I've got like 2 minutes left. So that's it for now. I tell you what, how many times do you hear me say my heart's full? This has been an incredible journey the last 21 years of my life. I've never regretted a day. It's a very hard, it's a hard work in that it's just a lot of effort is put forth into recording all these stories, the traveling, the editing, countless hours editing that nobody ever sees. And that's my life. You know, the secret life of Larry Capetto. Maybe make a movie out of that. If there's a filmmaker out there, a movie maker, let's do a movie. Capturing Courage on Camera. I've already got the title. I did a film 10 years ago under that title. It's on my Voices of History channel. It's the first one I did. It's a stepping stone into what I want to do next. I want to publish some books about my work and some of the individual stories that I've done. And if you're interested in any of that, let's partner together. What do you say? Let's do it. If you're not interested, but you know somebody that might be, share this video with them, please. And let's have a great Christmas. It would really help me out with my work, so I continue my work, that you would order these DVDs. Like I said, I'll send you these cool red, white, and blue, lest they be forgotten, wristbands. I call them bracelets. And this, I usually just give this lest they be forgotten commemorative pin to World War II veterans, but I'm going to make it available to somebody who buys the whole series. So that's the way it goes. And then you get a free DVD from me, CD, Songs from the Heart, piano music that I've recorded over the years. So you get that with every order, whether you order 1 DVD, 2, 10 or 11. If you order 12, just order 12. I'm giving you a special discount ordering the whole series, so it'd be more expensive to buy each one individually. So if you get 2, 3, or 4, just buy the whole series. It'll be worth it, and then you can donate it. You can do what you want. You can watch it, and just don't use them as frisbees. That's the only thing I ask. So seriously, thank you for watching and subscribing to this channel, Voices of History, listening to Voices of History radio 24 hours a day. I want you all to have a Merry Christmas, and let's remember the true meaning of Christmas, folks, this time of year. I don't like it when they take Merry Christmas out of greetings. I say Merry Christmas. That's the real meaning of Christmas. If you don't know the meaning of Christmas, watch Charlie Brown's Christmas special, and Linus will tell you what the real meaning of Christmas is. Okay, God bless you. Like I said, thank you for sharing these videos. Let's keep this thing going, folks. 2024 is going to be a great year. This country's going through a lot right now, and we're fighting for the same freedoms in our own country that our veterans fought for on foreign soil. And I want to help lead that charge. Amen. God bless you, and have a great, Merry Christmas.